So here at the Vanguard, we covered a lot of, congressional candidates and Senate candidates, down ballot races. And, we interviewed a lot of great candidates across the map, down ballot races. Unfortunately, not a lot of those candidates got through this time around. We're hoping that a lot of them run again and succeed in the future. People like Mike Siegel or David Kim, people all across the country that were repping real Adam Christensen.
Close.
Yeah, a lot of great candidates that we were so proud of. But something that we were reflecting on after the election was that while there might not have been as many progressive down ballot successes as we were hoping for, there was a little bit more hope to be found in some of these down ballot measures. Basically ballot measures that people can vote on state by state to decide things like in 2018 here in Missouri, where we live. We voted to legalize medicinal marijuana. And Missouri's not a blue state. It's not the most progressive bastion of.
Just went to Trump again.
Yeah, it just went to Trump again. Exactly. But again, we legalized medical marijuana, and we're probably going to legalize recreationally here in a couple of years too. All across the country, on election night, we saw similar results, similar progressive ideas, basically passed into law by the people, not the House of Representatives or whatever.
Leftist stronghold, South Dakota,
Yeah, exactly. And I remember I was even saying on election night that when I thought that Trump was going to win, and I was upset because I was like, Joe Biden, you should have leaned into these popular positions. You say you're in favor of decriminalizing marijuana, but the people of South Dakota, one of the reddest states, just voted to, full stop legalize. Why aren't you championing this very clearly popular issue where even in deep, deep red states, the people approve, pretty overwhelmingly. So I think the fact that so many of these ballot measures did pass across the nation is proof that Joe Biden could have easily leaned into some of his more, leftist, scary, progressive ideas or whatever. And it wouldn't actually have been a huge turnoff. In fact, it might have energized and excited some of the electorate, people like me, that don't really feel like they're being offered a whole lot by the administration. But real tangible things like that would have excited people, I think.
100%. Yeah, and I think that it just is indicative mostly of a real change in attitude towards drugs and a real understanding change and a real desire from the American people to distance themselves and really put an end to the war on drugs. Obviously it's been a complete and utter failure, and it doesn't get discussed about in terms that it needs to on a broad scale. We are literally about to inaugurate one of the chief architects of the war on drugs, and Its Highness unconscionable mandatory minimums, 3-strike policies, all kinds of things that ruin the lives of countless Americans, obviously particularly impacting Black and brown men across this country. And there needs to be a far more serious reckoning of that. But I think that it's the trend of drug legalization and not just cannabis. Oregon, I believe, just decriminalized small possession of all drugs. Is that, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah, indeed. Oregon actually, God damn it. Oregon, led the way. The nation decriminalized hard drugs overall. So yeah, they're heroin, methamphetamine, LSD, oxycodone, and other hard drugs. You can basically possess now without facing criminal.
As long as they're in personal possession quantities, I think is what it's described as. So obviously, we'd have to look into the logistics of that and see how it's going to be enforced. But hopefully, that's definitely a step in the right direction, regardless. And then across on the other side of the coast, you have Washington D.C. Was successfully decriminalized magic mushrooms. We on the Vanguard spoke with Melissa Lavasani of Decriminalized Nature DC earlier. If anybody wants to check that out, that was a great chat where she kind of laid out some of the benefits of psychedelic mushrooms and why they need to be treated as a medicinal kind of treatment and not a obviously Schedule 1 drug like they are now.
Yeah. And again, with those, it's not like you can just go, sell methamphetamine to the local elementary school kids or whatever. There's still laws when it comes to drugs. They're just saying that you shouldn't face criminal penalties. You shouldn't go to jail, be locked in a cage.
Yeah.
For, having an addiction to one of these extremely addictive drugs that people usually end up relying on in times of despair or when they are in really bad economic situations or experiencing extreme trauma. People turn to drugs usually not because they're, or at least really addictive drugs, not just because they feel like, fuck it, let's do some drugs. They're real, societal, economic reasons that obviously push people into that kind of a thing. So I think that this is so important that, places like Oregon and DC, of course, with the mushrooms are really leading the way. And yeah, it kind of looks like drugs are winning the war on drugs. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I think that the important thing to continue to push for as we start decriminalizing and no longer like prosecuting people for addiction, and we start viewing these people as patients instead of criminals, which they are. These are people who are struggling from an illness. They need assistance, right? In the same way that we now understand that mental illness is as real as an illness as, a broken bone, whatever. This is things that needs treatment. What the real trouble is that comes after that is, now you're not locked in a cage, but how are you going to get help? How are we going to, as a society that is experiencing such dramatically high levels of addiction, and this is not something that's unique to the U.S., but it is becoming an increasingly more populations are impacted by high percentage of drug addiction.
Yeah.
And a lot of these areas are concentrated in areas where there's been a lot of industrial shutdown, as well as in a lot of highly concentrated poor urban areas. So we need to make sure that as a left, we're not only pushing for the decriminalization and the controlled legal administration of drugs. I think it is a necessary progression if we're ever going to stop viewing drug addicts as criminals and instead view them as patients and view the drugs that they're receiving as medicine, like all medicine, right? And that you do have to legalize safe injection sites. You do have to provide people with access to therapy. This is another one of the countless reasons why we need a single payer Medicare for all system that moves towards a national healthcare system. Because I think one of the only ways that you can cure this pandemic, and it is a two-sided thing. One, you have to stop criminalizing people and view them as patients, but we also need to make sure that we are obviously providing them with the treatment that they need.
Well, and the ironic thing is that a lot of these drugs are themselves the treatment. You look at drugs like psilocybin or even MDMA, and a lot of times these drugs are being used to help people get off other drugs.
Yeah, as opposed to OxyContin, which is fucking legal.
Exactly. A lot of the addiction problem in this country isn't from drugs that are illegal. It's from drugs that are totally legal and that are pushed on people by, capitalist pharmaceutical industries and doctors, that get a cut of the money when they prescribe these drugs. So a lot of people are getting addicted without even trying to. I talk about like despair and stuff, but a lot of people are just, trying to deal with their fucking back pain. And the next thing they know, they're, addicted to opiates. And then after their prescription runs out, they have to, go to heroin because it's the only option. So the legalization of drugs like psilocybin or marijuana, it provides these alternatives for people that might end up, going down a dark path of addictive therapeutic or pharmaceutical drugs that were overprescribed to them, drugs like benzos and opiates and all these extremely addictive drugs that are being hoisted upon not just people with pain, but also kids and all kinds of stuff. It's crazy the amount of pharmaceutical, extremely hard drugs that are prescribed to people. And yeah, something like psilocybin or cannabis can offer profound treatment to a variety of different causes without that addictive element, without that need to keep coming back for another fix even after your problem is resolved. So I think this is some great results we have here, and I think that if there's one thing that we can maybe take away from this too, it's that this might be a serious issue where I think, despite his posturing, that we could actually potentially push the Biden administration in a real productive way. And that would be to get him to at least take cannabis off of the Schedule I drug, because these results are just they're so overwhelming and obvious and undeniable. The fact that the country, even in places like, Arizona and South Dakota and Montana, New Jersey, voters are, clearly voicing their favor for legalized drugs, legalized cannabis at the very least. So I think that this wouldn't just be the right thing morally for Biden and Harris to do. I think it would also be massively popular, and it's almost basically a mandate now, given these results. I mean, this is clearly something that the people want, and would be received well. I think Biden could make this happen. He could have,
100%. And I think he could also use it as a way of kind of bandaging and giving an olive branch to the communities that he's betrayed and scorned over the years, as a way of saying, Black-owned businesses should be able to have, felons should be able to build a career in legal cannabis distribution, after, being punished for, essentially that thing when it was a crime, instead of letting, Philip Morris get all the fucking profit from it.
Yep. It would be an extremely obvious, popular thing to do. Something I think we could potentially pressure the administration into doing. But obviously, who knows? But I do think these results are just so overwhelmingly positive in the favor of, look at this. In DC, 76% of the people voted to
fucking crazy.
To legalize psychedelic mushrooms. 10 years ago, if you had told me that the nation's capital would have legalized, or at least decriminalized, psychedelic mushrooms and other entheogens, you would have looked at me like I was fucking crazy.